Morning, Ronnie. Welcome to the Call-In family. What would you like to say this morning?
Yeah, good morning, Lurie. You
Lurie.
can't believe that you're like Clay Kane.
Oh,
You know,
thank you so. Oh my God. That is so kind of you. How so?
I mean, you're bringing up 1861
Yeah.
when the Civil War started. You
Yeah.
think that Trump, when they get around the table, they talk like that? That's
Mm.
people like you want to bring that up and keep drilling it in people's heads. We don't talk like that out here.
Ronnie, I have a question for you. Were you able to see any similarities between the reality I described in the 1860s and what we're experiencing right now?
Not really. No.
No?
No.
What about the idea that we used to have civil rights in the 1860s that then got pulled back and taken away by people who didn't want black people to have civil rights? That doesn't feel familiar to you? You don't see that reflected now?
No,
Huh.
black people go to the voting booth just like I go.
That is true, except that the voting booths in our communities are often the ones that get the machines that don't have the power cords. Yeah, that you might remember that happened in I believe it was in Georgia. They had an election, and then the election machines in the black communities they set up the machines, but they didn't have power cords. Or like what happened used to happen here in New York City, we would get the election machines that would break down. They were the manufactured the ones that had a lot of manufacturing issues with them, and we would get the ones that would break down. Or you know how there were like over 30 poll sites that just so happened to only be in black communities that had bomb threats and that had to get shut down. Did that happen in your poll site, Ronnie? Did your poll site get a bomb threat?
Yeah, it did.
It did. Oh, what community do you live in? A predominantly black community?
No,
That's weird because that's not what the report said. Where was your poll site at that got a bomb threat? Because that's not what the news said. What the news told all of us was that these were poll sites in predominantly black communities. In fact, I hadn't heard of a single poll site in a predominantly white community that had a bomb threat as well. This would be news.
that's that's the problem, Miss Favors. You think you believe everything the news says. That
Well, we don't have a belief factor here. We do a trust and verify sort of approach, and then actually shouldn't even say trust. We do a verify approach. So if you could tell me where your community was, we could do a quick search right now and see if your poll site actually had a bomb threat, because that this is the first time that we would hear about that in a non-black community. But the reason I'm asking is because let's say you did have a bomb threat in yours. The overwhelming majority of them, and we'll give that to you just for the sake of argument, the overwhelming majority of them were in black communities. The poll sites and the way that we see the implementation of voter suppression laws. If you saw what happened in North Carolina, where the Supreme Court said that the folks in North Carolina who were so good at voter suppression that they engaged in a surgical-like precision effort to prevent black and brown people and white people who were not Republicans from voting. Did you see any of that? Because that was the Supreme Court that said that we're talking about massive efforts of voter fraud and voter suppression. We saw that after 2013, when the Shelby County v. Holder case was decided by the Supreme Court, that the very same sorts of rules that previously states within the Confederacy were trying to get implemented for voters to change their voting rules had been denied by the provisions of the Voting Rights Act, the pre-clearance provision, which was responsible for determining whether or not a change to a voting rule would have a negative impact on communities of color. And the very same sorts of efforts that they tried to implement under the Voting Rights Act that they were told they were not able to do, as soon as the Voting Rights Act was destroyed in the 2013 Shelby County versus Holder case, those very same previously disallowed efforts were then the very first sets of rules that were implemented. So we definitely have a pattern of voter suppression that is specifically targeted to black people. So when I was asking you if you saw any similarities between what I was talking about with the 1800s and now, and one of the things you said was we just don't talk like that anymore, and or something to that effect. And I think that Ronnie, is a really important point, because you kind of do, right? Because we're producing the same realities, even though you're not talking about what happened in 1861. And the reason that happens is because history doesn't repeat, it rhymes. And if you don't know your history, you're not able to make connections between what used to happen and what's happening now. But I'm sure that's not what you called to talk about. What is the point that you actually wanted to make?
I'm a history major, but here's the point.
Whose history?
In my community.
Well, no, you said you're a history major. A history of what? What history? Whose history? Was there a specificity or just history generally?
History general.
Oh, well.
But here,
Okay.
I want to make this point.
Mm-hmm.
I want to make this point. In my community,
Mm-hmm.
in the voting day, they were willing to pick up anybody and take them home to vote.
Yeah.
You think
we had that too.
All right. They didn't ask the people, "Are you black or are you white?" They just
right,
asked,
and that would be illegal. So it's good that they didn't do that. But how does that make what point are you making with that, Ronnie?
making a point that you're black and white. You just want to be so racist about everything.
How do you? So Ronnie, if let's say you had, hypothetically, and God forbid, let's say you had cancer, Ronnie, and the cancer doctor who is an expert in cancer, in the specific type of cancer that you have, and if that doctor were to come into the room and talk with you about what the cancer was doing, how it got, what might have caused the cancer, what might happen, would you be mad at that cancer for not focusing on HIV/AIDS or another medical specialty? You wouldn't.
One more.
If you had a medical disease and you go to a doctor who is an expert in that type of disease, you wouldn't get mad at that expert for not talking about other types of disease. You would recognize that expert's expertise is exactly what you needed in this moment. You are listening to a show where there is an expert behind the microphone on the intersections of race, gender, culture, identity, politics, and the law. And I was an Africana Studies major, so that's the history that I come from, and that's the area that I specialize in, which meant that I had to not only know American history, I had to understand how that American history was driven by its addiction to white supremacy, which was a justification for the enslavement of African people, which was important because that's how America was able to get hundreds of years of free labor, which really severely undermined the white working class, something that you all should have been in alignment with black people on, but usually aren't. Does that make sense? And the reason I'm saying that is because we have an expertise here. We talk about race. We talk about gender, culture, and identity. So if you're calling up a show where that is the focus and you're mad that is the focus, it makes as little sense as it would if you were in a doctor's office talking to someone whose expertise was the type of cancer that you have, trying to get mad at the doctor for not focusing on something else. You came to us. This is what we do here. It's the Lurie Daniel Favor Show. Does that make sense, Ronnie?
Fair enough, Miss Favors, but all I heard was how you just slammed Trump, slammed the white people,
Okay. It makes sense that that's what you heard. Did you see him sign the executive orders?
Certainly I did.
Right. So everything I said about the executive orders, that was true. That's what he did. Did you see Elon Musk give the Heil Hitler salute?
That's what you saw. I didn't see the Heil Hitler salute.
Okay, because so there's a difference between you and I, Ronnie, and the difference is that you're willfully being blind in this moment. You know what you saw, Ronnie. You know it and I know it. We all know it. I don't even know why we're trying to play this game. You know damn good and well that's what you saw. And you know damn good and well that if anybody else had done it, you would have said that's a Heil Hitler salute. My question for you is why can't you stand on business? Like if you just support Hitler and you support Nazism, just say it. If you support white supremacy, just say it and be okay with it. I prefer that. I have more respect for that than to say that wasn't a Heil Hitler salute.
If that's how I felt, I would tell you that.
But it's not based on your feelings. You see, that's the thing. Facts and your feelings often don't necessarily have to have a connection. It's not based on your feelings. If I said, fuck you to somebody, I said it. I got to stand on it. If I do a Heil Hitler salute, I got to stand in public. I got to stand on it. And the problem we're having is that you just prefer the pretend. And the reason, just to get back to your first question, because we got other calls to get to, but the reason that we go back to the 1860s is because in addition to this being a show where I specialize in these subject areas, this is also a show that embodies a Sankofa approach. Now, Sankofa is a symbol out of the West African communication system known as the Adinkra symbol system, and it's basically a message that says we cannot understand where we are today. We certainly cannot prepare for the future if we do not understand how we got to this space, if we don't know the history. And so for us, you've entered into a space where we don't just think about what's happening in this moment. We think about what happened to bring us to this moment. Just like if you were to go to a doctor's office, the doctor can't just say, Ronnie, what hurts? And then you tell the doctor what hurts and then the doctor can fix it. The doctor, before you even get to the doctor, you're going to have some medical forms you got to fill out. And those medical forms are going to give the doctor your medical history. They don't just want to know about what you ate yesterday that's causing your tummy ache. They don't want to know about what happened to you when you were a little kid. They want to know what happened to your parents. They want to know what happened to your grandparents, what diseases exist throughout the the history of your family, people who may not even be alive today, the doctor needs that information so that they can make a proper diagnosis and move you forward towards a path of health. That's why we focus on history, Ronnie, because when you don't focus on history, you end up repeating the end of integration again and don't know it. When you don't know your history, you end up going back into Jim Crow and don't know it. So we learn things here. We know things here. We interact with the world through a basis of fact and information, because when you do that, we can make better decisions. Does that make sense to you, Ronnie?
Well, yeah, that's called hereditary. But
and hereditary is speaking to what? History. And you know what else is hereditary? Beliefs and attitudes and decision making. So just like we have people who believed at that time that white people deserve to have all the things simply because white people said so, and that's how they move through the world, we still have that today. So that's why we look at the history. And you've just given us an opportunity to explore that a little more. Final comment, because we got to get to some other calls before our guest comes in. Final comment.
I believe what George Bush said. I got mine, go get yours.
And so that makes sense for you. And that's why your life is going to be what it is. We are a communal people. And so that we don't do that here. And so I'm glad that that's good for you. But I honestly don't even think that that's true, Ronnie, because I've seen that you've called a couple of the shows. I'm now learning that you call a couple of the shows. So you're actually in this space a lot. I think you need community, Ronnie. I think that you are disquieted by what you're seeing, and I think that you feel the need for, you might even be one of these folks who are dealing with so much loneliness that anger is one of the primary modes that you get to operate in. But you obviously need community, because you don't just sit and listen to this show and the other shows on the channel. You call in, you try to challenge, and you are obviously craving human connection. And I just think that your world would be a whole lot better if you were in alignment with a political party that were designed to foster humanity, as opposed to one who convinces people like you to not see what we all saw. It was a Nazi salute. And you should either be man enough to stand on business and declare that that's what it was, but certainly don't call up to us, a community that's trying to build, when you ain't got nothing. Like, come on, we can't do that. But I appreciate you. I'm trying to be nicer. You know, I know some of y'all's mad because I gave him too much time. But and you also didn't say where your voting site was, which is why we don't really believe that your voting site was shut down through through the bomb threat. So again, you are in need of some things that you are getting here in Urban View. I would suggest that you do a little internal inquiry as to why it is that you seem to need to know what we're doing, since you have a worldview that's different and you don't like that we deal with history. And that's what we do. That's what we do. Let's get some other calls on.